Welcome to the Professors of Profit Show, your go-to source for mastering business, critical thinking, and wealth building strategies. I'm Dr. F Scott Feil, the Professor of Profit, and each week we'll dive into how thought leaders and CEOs think, make decisions, and drive success. You'll learn how to think like a CEO, make smarter choices, and turn profit into long-term wealth. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just getting started, this show gives you the mindset and tools to level up in business and life. Let's get learning. Class is in session. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Professors of Profit Show. I am Dr. F. Scott Feil, and I've got with me today longtime friend Dan Deutsch. We go back to high school days, even. Dan's got a
Crazy.
two. Yeah, he's got a 2-for-1 for us today. I'm pretty excited about this. So, one of the side hustles and side businesses that we talk about in the list of 100 is hosting a trivia night. And Dan has actually done that. However, he's also transitioned into a newer side business that we're going to get into as well. So, Dan, thanks for coming on. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the hosting trivia nights.
Well, Scotty, thanks for having me. Really fun, interesting story here for the trivia stuff. I was living in Hoboken, and one of my local watering holes hosted they had a trivia night every Tuesday that I would like to go and participate in because it was a fun time. And I got to know some of the staff there. And one night the host was not able to attend. So they had kind of called out sick, if you will. But what they did was they had sent in the questions and said, hey, if one of the bartenders or wait staff wants to, just read the questions, here you go, because they felt bad. They didn't want to cancel the night, which I thought was very noble of them. And I happened to be, sitting at the end of the bar, maybe an hour before the game was supposed to start. And my buddy Heath said, hey, Dan, would you want to, play the role of the host for the evening? We've got the questions and, fire away. And not being the shy type, I said, sure, that sounds like fun. And so that night I went through the process and read the questions and had some fun with with the folks that were playing, mixed in some jokes and things like that. And, at the end of it, everybody, had really positive feedback for it. And they ended up asking me a few weeks later, they asked me if I would be interested in just taking over as the host of the event. And I said, sure. What does it entail? And, they basically said, oh, we'll pay you a couple of bucks and take care of, a handful of drinks or whatever. And, you come in and basically you run it however you want. And so I started making up the questions on my own. I would come up with 4 categories every week, and I tried to mix and match so that it was a little something for everybody. We did usually there would be some sort of a history category. There would be a sports category, maybe a celebrity pop culture category, and then every now and then might mix in something like general science type of categories. But it was a lot of fun, man. And I ended up actually expanding to. I started out at one bar called McSwiggan's Pub in Hoboken, and then I actually ended up expanding to where I was hosting at McSwiggan's on Tuesday, at another bar called the Dubliner on Wednesdays, and then for a time there was a third bar that I was working at as well. So it went from something that was just kind of fun and a little bit exciting to actually being able to make a few $100 a week by going out and having a good time and hosting trivia.
That's awesome, man. You became the Cal Ripken story there. You kind of got the opportunity, stepped in, and then never looked back. I love
Exactly.
it.
I never did get to apologize to the host that I replaced, but I think that they saw the writing on the wall, and
Yeah.
everything worked out the way it was supposed to. So it was a good time. The Tuesday night gig grew in popularity to the point where we actually had to start tapping into the PA system in the bar. So at first I would just I have a pretty loud voice and I project my voice pretty well. So I would just, stand in the middle of the bar and do my thing. And by the end we had to actually get the microphone and that sort of thing. Cause I was losing my voice every week by trying to project it without sounding like you're yelling.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's cool. And I love the fact that it grew. That's the difference there. That's really where the
Yeah.
business opportunity kind of comes in. Is like, yeah, I'm doing this for fun, whatever. They give me a couple bucks, a couple drinks here and there. It's nice. But to actually take it and grow it to more than one spot, and actually, like you said, grow it within each of those, that's where the opportunity lies. So t tell us a little bit about like
Yeah.
like what your thought process was in that, like what, how did that occur? Like, what were you thinking when you thought like, oh, this could be a little something?
Yeah. So, the key factor there was, again, knowing some folks in the different bars, and there
Yeah.
was there was a bit of crossover in staff. So I ended up, you know, once it started to really take off at the first bar at McSwiggin's, I said, hey, I know more and more bars in town. This is, trivia nights are a pretty popular thing at this time. This was, 10 years or so ago. Um, Said, let me go and talk with, a guy Seamus that I knew at the Dubliner and just see if it's something that was on their radar at all. And from there, having some folks that were able to say, oh yeah, Dan, hosts a great trivia night and does a really fun job with it. And we've really been enjoying it. And so you get a little bit of credibility that way. But from a side hustle perspective, from a business perspective, it was okay. Started out as something that was fun, and it was always fun for me because I enjoyed doing it. But I really did want to take that next step and say, hey, how can I really, monetize this? Not into a career, of course, but as again, just as an extra few $100 a week instead of just, make $100 here and have a few free beers. And so the thought process there was, okay, how do we, tap into different nights? Hoboken's a small city, so I did have a bit of a following that would go from one bar to the next. So another consideration was every bar that I, add on to this is now more work because I
Yeah.
can't just use the same questions from Tuesday night on
Right.
Wednesday night. So would have to, do a bit more that way. But then also understanding a bit of what the crowd would respond to, which types of categories were more popular than others. And so it really did become something that I dedicated some time to. I put in the effort, and and it paid off. And as far as the expanding, it was really just, hey, opportunities presented themselves, and I was willing to do the work and put in the time and take advantage. So by the end of it, I was in three different locations, and I had a fourth that I would do. Kind of one-offs when they were
Yeah.
doing an event. They would call me and I would come in. So by the end of it, I started to mix in some more multimedia stuff, where we were tying into the TVs in the pub and doing some things like almost like like a name that tune type of thing. You'll play a clip of a song or show a video clip, and that really, people really seem to respond to that. That was a lot of fun, but that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
That was when it kind of
Yeah.
got to, okay, you know, balancing my regular career with
Right.
this side hustle, and we don't want to, tilt those scales too far in that direction. So that was when
Yeah.
it was like, all right, let's reassess a little bit here. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and really enjoyed that time in my life.
Yeah. So, a couple takeaways from there, right? Like one, you used your network. I love that, right? Like crossover staff and people that you knew,
Yep.
not only to get your foot in the door at the other gigs, but also to bring customers and new clients from one to the next, right? So that's pretty cool. Also, you said something interesting there. You said, yeah, Dan does a great job. We'd love to have him over, and it's like that's the first step, right? You got to have a good product. You got to do a good job. If you were crappy at it, nobody would recommend you anyway, right? So you've got a
Right.
good product to deliver. And then the third part is you were starting to get a little too busy to the point where I can't clone myself, right? I'm
Right.
only one person. I have a job, and then I'm doing this side thing, which is fun. I love doing it, but I can only be one place at one time. So then you got to start thinking about, all right, well, am I going to staff this thing? Do I scale it out that way? Like, do I create like a whole company around it and then we place it all over the town and try to grow from there? Because it's got to be relatively local in that case too. I mean, you have a radius that you can stick to personally. Then if you start hiring out, maybe you can expand there. But like, I love the fact that you're a real entrepreneurial mind. Like you're, never stopping here. Like you're always thinking of these things, and to have a career and then do a side business, like it can be done, right? It can be managed, but you said you have to make sure that scales don't tip too far in one way or the other. You have to know
Sure.
yourself. You have to know your limits, right? And you've done a great job of that. Now taking it to your new side business, which is even more successful. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So about 8 years ago, I moved back to Long Island, and I had in a previous iteration worked for a friend of mine that had a pool maintenance business, doing pool openings, closings, cleanings, stuff like that. So back in the early 2000s, I had worked for a buddy of mine doing that, and then over time, me and one of the other guys that I worked with would pick up some side jobs. We would pick up, we would do some work for like friends and family and things like that. And so over the years, we, would do our regular work. And then, when we got done with that, we would go and, do some other jobs for ourselves, and realize that that was where where the real money was. Instead of having somebody pay me a wage to
Yep.
do a job, I can go do it myself and make, much more money. So when I moved back to Long Island 8 years ago, again, wanting to have a another source of income and a side business, I picked that back up. And the way that I did it was I started out within my network of existing friends and clients, and I ended up getting a call from a referral to do a job up in Northport. And that woman then asked me for a business card. I didn't even have a business card at the time. I was just, Dan, the pool guy that can, help you out with stuff. So I went home and I kind of hastily made up like a flyer that just had, you know, the different services that I offered, and I named the company JD Pools, after my father's initials, JD. My dad was always a big pool guy, so I'm like, oh, we'll just call it JD Pools, whatever. So I sent it to this woman, and she ended up sharing that flyer on a Facebook moms page.
Yeah.
And from there, I got a million phone calls from people up in Northport, Greenlawn, Comac area, all surrounding towns. Because whenever somebody would ask, hey, pose a question, hey, looking for somebody to open my pool, looking for somebody to clean my pool, somebody would inevitably share my flyer and my contact
Yeah.
information. And, so I started to, accrue more and more clients. And as that grew, it really took some doing on my end to set up the infrastructure that would allow me to have a business that could be both profitable and also manageable. So a big piece of that was I had to get wholesale accounts at distributors and
Yeah.
suppliers, so that as I'm buying my chemicals, I'm not paying retail prices and then just passing that cost directly through. Now I get a wholesale price so that I'm making a profit on everything that I sell. I also had to buy obviously all of the equipment that you need to perform all of the various functions, which was not an issue. But then what I also did was I tripled up on that. So I made sure that I had three sets of vacuum gear,
Yeah.
pumps, filters, hoses, all that stuff, so that what I could also do was then expand and hire people to work for me. So similar to what you were mentioning earlier about the idea of expanding the trivia empire. I never went that direction there because I just couldn't wrap my mind around how I would properly scale it. With the pool business, I already understood how to
Yeah.
scale it. I just needed to find people that I could trust that could do the work. And then, the majority of the effort became, back end stuff, meaning scheduling, invoicing, billing, collecting, doing payroll, all of those functions that are less glamorous, but, very necessary if you're going to have a successful business. Um, So over the years, I started out with about 20 to 25 consistent clients that I would open and close their pool every year. And to date now, we just finished my really busy season, which is why it took us a little time
Yeah.
to get together here. But I think we just opened just over 100 pools this year. So really, in a matter of a little over 5 years from when I really decided to accelerate this, we have just about quadrupled in
Yeah.
size. I have one full-time employee. I have another guy that works for me, part-time in the summers. I've actually started to work with some of my nephews who are, now in high school, so that hopefully when they get to driving age, they'll be able to, to keep working for me. And that's kind of how I'm creating a bit of a sustainable, workforce by, expanding to kids that they need work. They're looking to work, looking to make some money. I pay them well, and I train them in what to do. So yeah, this has been a business that it also takes up a lot of time, especially in the months of May and September, because that's when you're opening them in May and you close them in September. And I personally open and close every pool, with workers that that help me. But all the other stuff, the power vacs, the weekly vacuums, things like that, I have guys that go out and do that work. So I am passively making a weekly amount of money that is great.
Yeah.
This is a side hustle that has we really you do blur the lines for a few weeks a year of which is your primary job and
Right.
which is your side job, but
Right.
I've found a way to make it work,
Yeah.
and it's been really successful.
Yeah, we don't understand that concept of closing pools down here in Texas. So
Yeah,
it's a one and done, but yeah, annual maintenance and stuff, So
sure.
again, a lot of takeaways from that. Like one, never underestimate the power of mom Facebook groups. Those things are massive. Um,
Absolutely.
I've seen it in several different fields work really well. And you don't have to, you're not pitching, you're not selling. You literally just have to be in there and answer questions, like that's it. That's all it takes. And then if one person shares your stuff, that's it. It just takes off, and in order to get them to share, though, you got to give that quality product again, right? It comes
Yep.
back to like having a good product and somebody who's going to refer you because I still believe that word of mouth referral has got to be the number one way to get new business, right? Because people trust other people. They know you're not going to give a crummy referral. Like if you
Hmm.
do a bad job, I'm not going to send you to that person. I'm not going to waste your time or my reputation. So
Exactly.
word of mouth goes a long way, and that's basically how I started my mobile physical therapy practice. Was just one guy told his buddy who told his buddy, and then, all of a sudden I was getting invited to these group banquets and these networking events and stuff, and they just kept spreading the name and sharing the name, and it was great. And I
Yeah.
mean, you can advertise, you can do paid ads and stuff for sure, but like, you know, the word of mouth is still one of the best ways to go. And until that dries up, I just lead into that real heavily.
100%. I have people actually ask me pretty often, how I advertise or how I grow my business, and I tell them all the same thing. I do not advertise. I don't do anything other than, referrals, word of mouth, and a big part of that is, I mean, you nailed it, Scott. It's do a good job
Yep.
and be reliable and be responsive. And I think that's something that I learned in
Yeah.
in this industry, especially. I have had people that, they've had horrible experiences with prior, contractors or companies because they wouldn't communicate, and they
Yeah.
didn't let them know when they were coming or what was going on. And I pride myself on, if you reach out to me, I will get back to you. It might not be immediately, but it will be quickly, and I will call you or I will text you.
Yeah.
You will know exactly what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and who's going to be there. And that goes a long way,
Yeah.
and that's what creates that trust with people, and that's what makes them want to refer me to others.
Yeah. Especially post COVID, the bar is so low for like
Yeah,
customer service and just doing a good job. Like what we always used to do,
sure.
no matter what job we had or what we did, we just, if you have a good work ethic and you work hard, you do the right thing, you were going to be pretty good, right? Nowadays, it just seems like it's just not there anymore. And if you can just do the bare minimum well, you're going to
Oh
go a long
man.
way, right? Then you give them the Disney experience of whatever the job is, and it's like, whoa, like you
Yeah.
blow their minds.
Buddy,
Uh,
I had one client that I went to give her a quote for a job, and she ended up, moving forward with me, and she said, Dan, if you can do me a favor and just ask your guys that if they're gonna drink beers, just don't leave the bottles in my backyard. And I was astonished. I said, wait, you mean somebody actually did that? Like this is you had an experience where, and she's like, yeah, the last guys they would smoke cigarettes and they would leave their beer bottles in my yard. And I just asked them to clean it up. So, like you said, the bar is so low
yeah,
that it's unbelievable.
yeah. Another big topic that I want to talk about a little bit, I took away from that last bit there was infrastructure,
Mm.
systems, standard operating procedures, infrastructure. That to me is really where I made my biggest mistake in starting any business was I just was like, all right, I know what I want to do. I know the product I want to give. I built it out. Here it is, right? Without those systems, without that infrastructure, without understanding the things that you need to do, the must-dos of a business, and being able to recreate them very easily over and over and over and over again, it's really hard to run a business and or grow a business, right? Like you don't realize how important systems and standard operating procedures are for any business. And in hindsight, had I to do it all over again, I wish I had started that while I was building it, like literally writing out my systems and my standard
Yep.
operating procedures and the whole infrastructure as I built it. I just built it, like build the plane, as you're landing kind of thing. And then like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to now go back and redo all that stuff because nobody understands. It's all up in my brain and I got to get it out on paper.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
it's weird. Like I'm assuming because this is, your second or third time now starting and operating and working within a business that you just went from the start with that, right? Did you just know that you were going to have to do that, or did it come with growth?
So for the pool business, I started out with that mentality from the beginning. I didn't know how much or how quickly I was going to grow and expand, but I wanted to make sure that we had some standards in place that would make it easy for me to scale. Um, and a big part of that was my experience working for somebody else previously and learning what worked, what didn't work. I could see the mistakes that this guy was making and identified ways that they could be, more efficiently handled, in my personal business. And so from the beginning, I wanted to make sure that I had just very specific standards, that we had systems in place, and really wanted to I was very heavy on documentation, like you just said it. If everything's in your head, then you're a single point of failure.
Yeah.
So what I did was I literally wrote out, hey, this is what I do when I open a pool. This is everything that's included. These are the steps in the process. This is, essentially it became a checklist for when we work. This is, hey, when we do a cleaning, these are the things that we do. This is, and my guys at first kind of laughed like, oh, I know how to do this. And I said, okay, well, I want you to do it my way, because I want, literally when you're walking into somebody's yard from the truck, their first trip in, I want you to carry the pump and the filter, first, and I want you to set that up, and then you run the extension cord, and then you do, steps 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
And they found that when you're doing something and you're repeating it, it does become
Yep.
faster, more efficient, and less room for mistakes. Where, oh,
Yeah.
I forgot to clean out the skimmer basket. It's like, nope, that's step 4 on your list. So
Right.
if you're repeating it, then eventually it becomes second nature, and it eliminates a lot of human error, which in this business it is, there's a lot of potential for that.
Yeah.
So I have found from the beginning with the pool stuff, I really wanted to be heavy on documenting, and having everything really lined up a specific way. It's also better, I found it's easier to communicate that to the client, because then you don't have any gray area. You don't have any misunderstandings of what's included and what are you paying me for. So I'm going to charge you this, and this is what I'm going to deliver. And that's it. And we agree upon that before we go there. I've had the situation where client said to me, "Oh, I thought that a cleaning was included in your opening charge." And I said, "No, no, ma'am. I gave you the list of exactly what we do."
Yeah.
And then that was a much easier conversation than if I had not shared that with them originally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Coach John Wooden, right? Hall of Fame coach, taught his guys how to tie their shoes appropriately, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the simple, basic stuff. But it's like, hey, you have to do this right. Here's how to put on the socks. Here's how to tie your shoes correctly. Now let's go out and practice basketball, right? If you do the basics, the fundamentals right, and you do them the same way every time, like you said, less failure, more efficient, more apt to be successful. And then if something does come up like that, you've got it in black and white, and it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I see that now. It's
Yep.
not you can't dispute that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time, man, and for coming on here to kind of share your journey and your experience. What kind of takeaways do you have for somebody who's considering starting a side business or just, isn't sure about it? Like, what kind of tips would you give them? What takeaways would you give them?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, as a side business, you want it to be something that you have some sort of passion for, something that you're going to be able to enjoy doing, something that you have a skill set that has a value to it. And then from there, identify what your market is going to be. When I was doing the trivia stuff, I decided to expand within a small region. But then I also chose not to take it to a larger scope, because I didn't think that I could handle that. I wasn't ready to do that. I think stay within your means, stay within your strong points, and then you have to consider and figure out what is the balance that you're willing to have between all of your other responsibilities. I've got a wife and I've got two kids and I've got a career, and then I have a side business. So how much of that are you willing to, prioritize or deprioritize to be successful? And then, for me, and this is honestly, it's been a bit of a moving target, but kind of identify success. What
Yeah.
does success look like for you in this side business? Is it just you want to go make a couple $100 and have a few free beers and have fun, with some buddies, a few times a week? Because that's what it was for me with trivia, and that was great, and I was successful there. With my pool business, it's I want to have a secondary source of income so that I can do things and save money and have have the ability to spend on vacations and stuff like that. But I identified what that success would look like, and now we're still, because of the growth, like I said, that's been a little bit of a moving target, because
Yeah.
as we do keep going, it becomes something like, okay, how do we want to expand this? Maybe we do. Maybe we want to, maybe we want to transition this from a side hustle to, a new enterprise. But
Yeah.
I think the most important things are, again, identify what you do well and what you actually have some level of passion for. Identify what success looks like for you and figure out what that balance is from a timing perspective, because there are, as we all know, there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, those would certainly be the advice that I would give to anybody considering some sort of side hustle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, such great takeaways, man. I mean, you nailed the essence of what it's like to like start a business and why, your why, right? Like it's gonna be different for everybody, right? Especially success. Success could be, I just want, extra $1,000 a month. All right, great. Or I want a seven-figure business. Here's what I'm gonna do, right? Like
Yep.
it's different for everybody, and I think realistically, man, you're doing it right. You're doing it the right way. So I applaud you for that. Where can people find you if they're up in the New York area, the Long Island area, and they need some help with the pools? Where can people find a business?
You can catch me on Facebook. I do have a Facebook page for JD Pools NY. Otherwise, ask somebody, and there's a good chance they'll refer me directly.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll put that link in the show notes so everybody can find the biz. Dan, pleasure catching up, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, man.
Thank you, Scott. This is great.
If you're tired of the constant stress and pressure of living paycheck to paycheck, burdened by debt or student loans, and you're ready to take control of your future, it's time for a change. Starting your own side business doesn't have to be risky. It can be safe, smart, and a good way to build wealth and create the life you deserve. Head over to pteducator.com to see if you're a good fit for the Professors of Profit Masterclass, where we'll teach you the strategies, mindset, and tools to turn your business dreams into reality, all while managing your day job and financial responsibilities. You don't have to do this alone. Let's start building your financial freedom together.